You are not here by accident. The very fact that you exist, that you are conscious, that you are capable of thought and action is a testament to something deeper than mere randomness. Life is not arbitrary. It has weight. It has significance. And at the core of that significance is the undeniable reality that you are seen, you are known, you are valued. People struggle with this concept. We live in a world that measures worth in metrics, productivity, status, appearance, success. From the moment we enter into the structures of society, we are taught implicitly and explicitly that we must earn our place, that we must justify our existence through achievement, through contribution, through approval. And so we strive, we work, we push ourselves to be enough, to prove that we matter. But underlying all of that is the quiet, gnawing question, what if I'm not enough? What if I fail? What if, at my core, I am insignificant? This is a devastating question, and it weighs heavily on the soul. It leads to anxiety, depression, despair. People chase validation in every possible direction, through relationships, through career, through material wealth, hoping that if they just do enough, they will finally quiet the voice inside that whispers their inadequacy. And yet, despite all their efforts, the emptiness remains. But consider for a moment the possibility that your worth is not something you have to earn, that it is not contingent on your successes or failures, your strength or weakness, your virtue or vice. Consider the radical notion that you are already known and already loved, that before you ever lifted a finger to prove yourself, you are already worthy. This is not an easy idea to accept. It flies in the face of how we typically navigate the world. We are conditioned to believe that value must be demonstrated, that nothing is given freely. And yet the deepest truths are often the most counterintuitive. What if your existence itself is enough? What if the very fact that you are here means that you are wanted, that you are seen, that you are loved beyond your comprehension? Look at the complexity of life, the vastness of the cosmos, the intricate balance of the natural world. Everything has been woven together in a way that is beyond human understanding. And in the midst of all of it, here you are, a singular, unrepeatable individual, placed in this moment, in this place, with this mind, this body, this soul. That is not an accident. That is not meaningless. If you were truly insignificant, if you were merely the byproduct of chance, then nothing would matter. Your joys, your struggles, your victories, your failures, none of it would hold any real weight. And yet you feel that it does. You know deep down that your suffering matters, that your choices have meaning, that your presence in the world makes a difference. That is not an illusion. That is reality. And so the question is not whether or not you are valued. The question is whether or not you will accept it, whether or not you will allow yourself to believe in your own significance. Because the greatest tragedy is not that people are unloved, it is that they fail to recognize that they are loved. And when you understand that, when you truly grasp it, everything changes. You stop seeking validation in the wrong places. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who will never see you clearly. You stop basing your self-worth on temporary, fragile things. Instead, you begin to stand firm in the knowledge that you are already enough, that you are already known, that you are already loved. And from that place, when you stop living to earn love and start living because you are loved, you become something truly remarkable. You become strong, not out of fear, but out of purpose. You become courageous, not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because you understand what truly matters. You begin to live in a way that reflects the truth that has always been there, that you are not forgotten, not overlooked, not irrelevant. You are seen, you are known, you are valued. That has always been true, and it will always be true. The question is, will you choose to believe it? Before anything was made, before the first moment of time unfolded, before the world was set into motion, there was intention. not randomness, not chaos, not an arbitrary series of events without purpose, but design, order, structure. And within that structure, within that unfathomable vastness of reality itself, there was a place for you. Now, this is a staggering thought. It's one that requires serious consideration because it contradicts a fundamental fear that plagues human existence, the fear of meaninglessness. If you were an accident, if you were nothing more than the product of blind evolutionary forces, then you wouldn't matter. Your existence would be incidental. Your presence here would be nothing more than a temporary flicker in an indifferent universe. And yet you know that isn't true. You feel it. There is something within you, something deep, something beyond words that tells you that you are not merely here, but that you are meant to be here. That your existence is not an accident, but a calling. That before you even took your first breath, before your first conscious thought, before you even had the ability to question your own worth, you were already chosen. But chosen for what? That is the question. It is one that cannot be ignored. If you are chosen, if you are here on purpose, then that means something is required of you. That means your life is not your own to waste in apathy, in despair, in self-pity, or in bitterness. It means that you have a role to play, one that only you can fulfill. And this is where people falter, because to be chosen is a tremendous responsibility. It is easier to believe that life is meaningless than to accept that you have been called to something higher. Because if you are chosen, then your choices matter. If you are chosen, then you cannot allow yourself to remain weak or bitter or complacent. If you are chosen, then you have to rise, and that is terrifying because it means stepping into the unknown. It means confronting your fears, your limitations, your insecurities. It means refusing to accept mediocrity. It means recognizing that you are not here to merely exist. You are here to become. And what does it mean to become? It means stepping fully into the truth of who you were meant to be. It means rejecting the lie that you are just another face in the crowd, just another insignificant being among billions. It means standing up, straightening your shoulders, and walking forward in the knowledge that you have been given something precious, an identity, a purpose, a calling. And when you begin to understand this, when you truly accept it, everything changes. You stop waiting for someone else to define you. You stop looking for validation in the shifting opinions of people who do not even understand their own worth. You stop playing small. Because to be chosen is to be set apart. To be chosen is to be given a responsibility to grow, to build, to create, to strengthen, to bring something into the world that would not exist without you. And that is a burden, yes, but it is also an invitation to step into something greater than yourself, an invitation to become the person you were always meant to be. But here's the thing, you cannot accept being chosen without also accepting the weight of that choice. To be chosen does not mean that life will be easy. It does not mean you will be spared from struggle, from suffering, from hardship. In fact, the opposite is often true. To be chosen means that you will be tested, that you will be challenged, that you will be required to step beyond your comfort, beyond your fear, beyond everything that is small and weak within you. And that is hard, that is painful, but that is also what makes it worth it. Because you do not become strong without resistance. You do not become wise without trials. You do not become who you were meant to be by staying the same. And so, the question is not whether or not you have been chosen. That much is already settled. The question is, will you accept it? Will you step into the responsibility of your own existence? Will you rise to the challenge that has been placed before you? Will you have the courage to live as though your life truly matters? Because it does. It always has. The only thing left is for you to believe it.
People are constantly searching for a sense of worth. They chase it in achievement, in beauty, in recognition, They look for it in the approval of others, in their ability to succeed, in their capacity to be useful. But here's the problem. None of those things can provide real, lasting worth. They are too fragile, too fleeting. The moment you build your self-worth on something external, you hand over control of your identity to forces beyond your control. And when those forces shift, when circumstances change, when the world no longer recognizes you as valuable, what happens then? This is why so many people live in quiet desperation. They are trapped in a cycle of proving themselves, of trying to earn something that was never meant to be earned. Because at the core of their being, they do not believe that they are enough. They have accepted the lie that worth is something to be gained rather than something that is inherent. But that is not true. You were not created to prove yourself to the world. You were not placed here to beg for scraps of validation from people who do not see you clearly. Your worth is not something that fluctuates based on performance, beauty, intelligence, or success. It is something far deeper, something unshakable. And unless you understand that, you will always be at the mercy of forces outside of you. The world will tell you 1,000 different things about who you are. It will give you standards to meet, categories to fit into, expectations to fulfill, and if you let it, it will reduce you to something far smaller than what you were meant to be. But the world is not the authority on your worth. It does not have the final say on who you are. It did not create you, and it does not define you. So what does? Where does your worth actually come from? If it is not found in the approval of others, if it is not rooted in success or status, then what is it built upon? The answer is simple. It is built upon the truth that you were made intentionally for a purpose by something greater than yourself. It is built upon the fact that you were formed with care, with meaning, with identity, before you ever had the chance to prove yourself to anyone. This is a radical notion, and it is not easy to accept, because if it is true, if your worth is truly intrinsic, then that means you must stop looking for it in all the wrong places. It means you must stop defining yourself by what you achieve, by what others think of you, by whether or not you are deemed good enough, by an ever-changing set of standards. It means you must stop chasing what has already been given to you. And that is difficult because it requires stepping outside of the system that the world has built. It requires rejecting the idea that you must be constantly proving yourself, constantly earning your right to exist, constantly shaping yourself into something worthy of love and respect. It requires standing firm in the truth that you already are worthy, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. But make no mistake, accepting your worth does not mean complacency. It does not mean sitting back and refusing to grow. Quite the opposite. When you understand your worth, when you truly grasp it, you begin to live differently. You stop acting out of fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not measuring up. Instead, you start to act out of purpose. You start to build something meaningful, not because you need to prove your value, but because you know your value. This is where real strength comes from, not from arrogance, not from self-obsession, but from the deep, unshakable confidence that you are enough. Not because you are perfect, but because you are created with worth that cannot be taken from you. And when you live from that place, everything changes. You no longer allow people to define you. You no longer seek approval from those who do not see you clearly. You no longer shrink yourself down to fit into the expectations of others. Instead, you rise. You step into who you were meant to be. You take responsibility for your life, not because you are trying to prove anything, but because you understand that your life already has meaning. And when you do that, when you truly embrace your worth, you become a force to be reckoned with. You walk differently, you speak differently, you carry yourself with a quiet confidence that does not need external validation to exist because you know the truth. You always have. The only thing left is to live like it.
People often believe that love, real, unbreakable love, is conditional. That it depends on their behavior, their worthiness, their ability to live up to a certain standard. They fear that if they fail, if they make mistakes, if they reveal the truth of who they are, flawed, uncertain, struggling, then that love will be withdrawn, that it will disappear, that they will be left alone. This belief is not accidental. It is built into the way we experience the world. From childhood, we learn that approval is something we must earn. We see love and acceptance given as a reward for good behavior and withheld as a punishment for failure. We internalize the message that our value is conditional, that our belonging is something fragile, that we must constantly strive to be good enough to be wanted. And yet deep down, this creates a fundamental terror, because if love is conditional, then no one is truly safe, no one is truly secure, no one can ever rest in the knowledge that they are seen and known and still loved. If love is something that can be lost, then it is not love at all, it is a transaction. But real love, true, lasting, unshakable love, is not transactional. It is not based on merit. And it does not disappear when you fail to live up to expectation. It does not abandon you in your weakness or turn away when you fall short. It is not something you can lose, because it was never something you had to earn in the first place. And this is where many people struggle. Because if love is truly unconditional, if nothing can separate you from it, then that means you must confront the terrifying possibility that you are already loved. Even in your worst moments, even in your deepest failures, even when you feel unworthy, it means that you must accept something that feels almost too good to be true, that you are not rejected, not forgotten, not cast aside. That is not an easy thing to accept, because it requires rejecting the lies that have shaped your identity. It requires stepping away from the belief that your worth is tied to your performance. It requires surrendering the idea that you are only lovable when you are perfect. And that is painful, because it means letting go of control. If love is not something you earn, then it is also not something you control. You cannot manipulate it, cannot force it, cannot hold on to it through sheer effort. It simply is. And that is both freeing and terrifying, because it means you are no longer required to prove yourself, but it also means you must learn to receive what has already been given. And receiving is often harder than striving, because striving allows you to feel like you are in control. But receiving requires humility, it requires trust, it requires the willingness to accept that you are loved, not because you have done everything right, but simply because you are. And when you accept that, when you truly begin to believe it, everything changes. You stop living in fear of being abandoned. You stop seeking validation from people who do not understand your worth. You stop exhausting yourself with the endless pursuit of proving that you are good enough. Instead, you begin to live differently. You begin to take risks, not because you are afraid of failure, but because you know failure does not define you. You begin to stand up for yourself, not because you are trying to prove your value, but because you know your value is already established. You begin to extend grace to yourself and to others, because you understand that love is not something that must be rationed, but something that is infinite. And this changes not only how you see yourself, but how you interact with the world. When you are no longer desperate to be loved, you are able to love others freely. When you are no longer afraid of rejection, you can be courageous in your relationship. When you no longer live in constant anxiety about being enough, you can finally become the person you were always meant to be. And so the question is not whether or not you are loved. That much is already settled. The question is whether or not you will accept it. Whether or not you will allow yourself to believe in a love that does not abandon, does not waver, does not require you to be anything other than who you are. Because if you do, if you truly accept it, then you will be free. And when you are free, you will finally begin to live. Life is not meant to be easy, that much is clear. It is filled with suffering, with hardship, with moments of profound doubt and despair. No one escapes this reality. At some point you will encounter pain, real pain, the kind that shakes you to your core, that makes you question everything you once believed, that tempts you to give in to cynicism, bitterness, or hopelessness. But here is something crucial to understand. Suffering itself is not the enemy. Pain is not the thing that destroys people. What destroys people is the belief that their suffering is meaningless, that it serves no purpose, that it is random, empty, devoid of anything that could redeem it. That is what crushes the human spirit, not the suffering itself, but the perception that it has no value. And so you must ask yourself a critical question. What if your suffering is not meaningless? What if it has a purpose? What if it is shaping you into something stronger, wiser, more resilient? What if, instead of being a sign that you are abandoned, it is proof that you are being prepared for something greater? This is not an easy idea to accept. People want comfort. They want security. They want a life free from struggle. But that is not how the world works. The greatest individuals throughout history, the ones who left behind legacies of courage, wisdom, and transformation, none of them were shaped by ease. They were forged in fire. They were made in the crucible of suffering. And so are you. It is a mistake to believe that life should be without difficulty. It is a mistake to assume that hardship means you are on the wrong path. The truth is quite the opposite. It is through adversity that we grow. It is through struggle that we develop character. It is in suffering that we find out who we truly are. But many people run from this truth. They resent their suffering. They become bitter. They look at the challenges in their life and see them as injustices, as proof that they have been abandoned, that the world is against them, that nothing matters. And so they give up. They stop trying. They stop hoping. They retreat into self-pity, into anger, into despair. And that is the real tragedy. Because suffering alone does not destroy a person, but suffering without meaning does. And meaning is not something that simply appears. It is something you must actively seek. You must choose to look at your suffering and ask, what is this teaching me? How can this shape me? How can this make me stronger? Because if you do not ask those questions, then suffering will do nothing but break you. Strength is not born in comfort. Wisdom is not developed in ease. The people who endure, who overcome, who rise above the challenges of life, these are the people who refuse to be destroyed by their suffering. They do not deny its existence. They do not pretend it doesn't hurt. But they also do not allow it to make them small. They do not let it steal their purpose. They do not let it turn them into people who have given up on life. And this is what you must decide. When suffering comes, and it will come, you will have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it refine you. You can let it harden your heart, or you can let it make you more compassionate. You can let it convince you that life is cruel and meaningless, or you can let it push you towards something deeper, something greater. And this is not an easy path. It requires strength. It requires resilience. It requires the willingness to endure when everything inside of you wants to give up. But if you choose it, if you decide that your suffering will not be wasted, that it will not be meaningless, then you will become something rare. You will become someone who can face life's greatest trials without being destroyed by them. And when you do that, you become a source of strength for others, because suffering is universal. No one escapes it. And when you have walked through it and come out stronger, you will have something to offer the world. Wisdom, courage, the ability to stand firm in the face of hardship and say, I have been there, I have endured, and so can you. So do not fear suffering. Do not resent it. Do not run from it. Face it. Endure it. Let it shape you. Let it refine you. Let it prepare you for the person you were meant to be. Because if you do, you will not just survive. You will overcome. And in overcoming, you will find a strength that cannot be taken from you. A strength that will carry you through anything that comes. A strength that will make you unshakable.